Hi there. So today I have a little video on the forearm and elbow positioning and some extra help and tips for you. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. First, let's do the video. This is our positioning video we've made for you to do. You're going to use your book and go along with the video and make your matrix to study. So we're at the beginning, and I'm going to let it play through for you, and then we'll talk about some anatomy and do the quiz that I created for you, show you that.
Hello, hello. So today I have a video on the forearm positioning for you. So for the forearm, we're going to do an AP and a lateral. We're going to use 40-inch SID. We need a 14x17 portrait to go along the length of the arm, center to mid forearm for our central ray. Patient's going to be seated at the end of the table. The AP, we want to have the shoulder, the elbow, and the forearm all on the same plane. So you're either going to build it up or have them slouch down a little bit so it's all level. The palm of the hand is going to be supinated so the arm is in a true AP projection for the beam to come through the anterior side, exiting the posterior side. So supinate up the arm. Then we are also going to do a lateral. The patient's still going to be seated at the end of the table, and we need to make sure we have the elbow flexed 90 degrees, keeping the shoulder, elbow, and forearm on the same plane. The elbow and the wrist should be in a true lateral position. So we call that on the thumb up position. So the thumb side of the hand is facing up, and the wrist is in true lateral. Breathing instructions not needed. We just want the patient to hold still, don't move. Clinical indications, fractures, dislocations, forearm bodies, any kind of pathology like osteomyelitis and or arthritis. So here we have our video. See our hands supinated. We want to twist that so the wrist is in true AP. Find the mid forearm with our light. Collimate down through both joints, elbow joint and wrist joint. And that is our AP forearm. Full body lead, thyroid shield could be used. Turn it for your lateral. Switching out her IR. Everything on the same plane. Turning the wrist so that it's straight up and down. And we need to get past the bend in the elbows area so we get a little bit past the elbow joint up the humerus. And that's our lateral. Radiographs, you will see AP. You'll see both the epicondyles are parallel to the IR. The radial head is in the picture. Both styloid processes at the wrist end. The olecranon fossa and the olecranon in the middle of the elbow joint. We do want to see all the soft tissue. Then we go to our lateral view. We want to make sure we see that 90-degree bend. That will give us that olecranon process and the fossa where the trochlea notch is. We can also see the radius and ulna in true lateral. But the arm should look like a lateral wrist at the proximal end, the distal end. Sorry. The radius and ulna should be superimposed over each other, and you should have a little bit of the metacarpals in your radiograph. Okay.
All right. So that was our video that we made for you guys. The positioning video that you're going to watch. I also have a lesson that I will have a link to, the forearm and elbow lesson. So I'm going to go through some of the anatomy in this. Back to the beginning for a second. You will be able to click through. It's PowerPoint slide type. that you can go along with your book and study, make index cards, study guides from. Highly recommend that. You can also use it to save the pictures, make quizzes for yourself. I'll take it back at the beginning here. So these page numbers may have changed if you've got a different edition than what I had when I made this. So don't worry about page numbers necessarily. So the upper limb is how our chapter starts. So we're going to go from the fingers all the way up to the shoulder girdle area. And today specifically focus on radius ulna to the humerus where the elbow joint is. So the forearm is just radius and ulna. It includes both the elbow joint and the wrist joint. We can orient our radius by the anatomical position. The thumb is going to be on the lateral side. The radius is going to be with the thumb because you're going to be RT. So that is how you would kind of focus on looking at a radiograph to find what anatomy is where, because we want to know that the radius is on the lateral side. So when we get up to the elbow, we can figure out of the lateral and medial condyle, epicondyles. So our radius is bigger at the bottom. And on that, we have styloid processes. On the ends, you'll feel these little pointy, kind of projected out anatomy on the wrist. Those are our radial and ulnar styloids. So on the thumb side, we have a radial styloid process. On the side, we have the ulnar styloid process, as you'll see here. We have a distal radial ulnar joint here, and we have a proximal radial ulnar joint at the proximal end. So we have both distal and proximal radial ulnar joints. On this, in the book, in the reading, you will see that it talks about this ulnar notch that is on the radius. It's a little notch that the ulna can sit into and articulate with at that joint space. The head of the ulna is down here. The head of the radius is at the proximal end here. The proximal radial ulnar joint, this one has the radial notch that is located on the ulna bone for the head of the radius to articulate. So some trivia type questions you could have there. Some other specific anatomy you're going to want to know is this little process here, this little triangle beak-like process. I want you to get the bones out in class and look at that. The coronoid process. That's that beak-like triangular projection here. This is the ulna. The end of the ulna is really big, actually. It is a kind of a cup shape, curved shape bone where our humerus sits. And this is our olecranon process in the back. So just when you're looking at the bone, I want you to notice this shape and the two processes we have. This is the coronoid process in the front, in the back, the bigger part, and the olecranon process. That's what we hit our funny bone on the olecranon process. We also have a little bump on the side of the radial bone, the radial tuberosity. And then we have a neck right below the head of the radius. So some other anatomy, the body and shaft of both bones, radius and ulna. Looking at it again, now we're talking about just the styloid processes and some special anatomy on the ulna here that we just went over. There's that view from the side of the olecranon process, kind of a C shape. Inside here, there's a dip or an indentation. This is the trochlear notch, also called semilunar notch, an older term for it. There's that little triangular process, coronoid process. Looking up close at just the elbow joint here, similar anatomy that we just talked about. The condyles are on the side of our humerus, a medial condyle and a lateral epicondyles, sorry. That is our bumps on the side of our humerus. Here's a little indentation on the humerus called the coronoid fossa. That's where it's going to articulate with this process, the coronoid the trochlea bone. This is this piece here, the trochlea, comes all the way around and articulates with the coronoid process, that little beak process of the ulna when you bend your arm. On the back side, we're going to look at the olecranon fossa, where the olecranon can dip into on the humerus. So we have fossas for those bones that poke out. On this half of this bump, if you look at the bony anatomy, you'll see the bone has these little like hills or bumps. This side is the trochlea that sits on top of the ulna. Then on top of the head of the radius is the capitulum. The head and the cap. The cap sits on the head. That's a nice, easy way to remind yourself of that. And then there's another little indentation for the head, the radial fossa, right next to that coronoid fossa. From the side, same anatomy. We'll see the olecranon process coming in, and in the back, we have that olecranon fossa. On this side, we have the little piece of the little triangular beak, the coronoid process in the front, goes inside and hits back in here in that fossa for it. You can see that more from the other view. This area has a couple of different things going on here. The space itself is that trochlea notch or semilunar notch, the space inside here that the humerus sits in. The trochlea itself is that bump. So right now we have those two bumps that we just looked at from the front, the capitulum and the trochlea, kind of right on top of each other. So they're labeled a little different because they're not super equal in size. One's a little more projecting out, which is the trochlea, it sticks out more. The capitulum isn't as big, it lays back a little bit. This label for the epicondyle is the bump on the side. We have the epicondyles on a lateral elbow view, which is what we're looking at, on top of each other. So this specific one, if we wanted to be real technical, we would say that is the lateral, but they're superimposed on top of each other. The epicondyles are straight up and down to the table, so they're perpendicular to the table, overlapping each other on the lateral view. And there's the radiograph of that. So we have our epicondyle here, we have our trochlea piece here, radial head, the neck. They want to separate out this little sulcus area. J is the trochlear notch or semilunar notch. And this correlates to the same pictures in the book. An AP view of the elbow. Here we have the radial head. Here's that olecranon process coming back. Our radial sits on the lateral side, so F is going to be the lateral epicondyle. E is the capitulum. B is the trochlea over here. A is the medial epicondyle. So the classification, synovial, that's our elbow joint. That's a hinge type. And then where the radius and ulna joint is a pivot. They kind of pivot on each other. That's our movement of our arm when we supinate and pronate our hand. The radius and ulna crisscross over each other when we have the palm down. That's why we do our projections with the palm up. And that's just x-ray of different movements of the arm. So in an AP view, see how the radius and ulna are touching here, and that little tuberosity is kind of touching in, the radial head's overlapping the ulna. Now when we rotate our hand with the thumb out, external rotation, we're going to open up that space, and the radial head's going to be more seen total without superimposition of the ulna bone. So this is our view if we want to see the radial head. This is our other rotation, internally rotated elbow. This is the one that shows this little beak, the process, that coronoid process. Have a little terminology sheet I have made for you called ICER to remember it. I is for the internal rotation, is the coronoid process, and E is external rotation for the radial head, ICER. We have some fat pads we're going to talk about. These are very important for the elbow because you will see injury if you cannot see all of the fat pads. So doctors will look for that. So a posterior fat pad is not typically visualized on a negative study. So a negative study meaning that there's nothing wrong with the patient. So if we see that posterior fat pad pushing out, then we know that it's probably got some inflammation or swelling, or the doctor will. And then the positioning we went over with the video. So there's the positioning of the forearm. Now let's look at elbow.
Hi, so I'm going to show you the elbow positioning in the videos for positioning of the elbow. So we have 4 views we're going to do on the elbow. AP oblique views. We have 2 internal and AP oblique external. The way we're going to rotate the arm internal and externally. And then we have a lateral 40-inch SID 10x12 portrait centered to the mid elbow joint. Patient's going to be seated at the end of the table. Hand, forearm, and elbow need to be on the same plane. The AP, we should see the epicondyles are parallel to the IR. The obliques, we want to see the epicondyles 45 degree. One is going to be internally rotated and one is going to be externally rotated. And then on the lateral, the line between the epicondyles is going to be perpendicular to the IR. No specific breathing instructions, just hold still, don't move. Clinical indications, fractures, dislocations, foreign bodies, pathological processes such as osteomyelitis and or arthritis. All right, let's look at our video. So 10x12 portrait, centered to the middle of the elbow joint, and roll her arm so that it is true AP. Full body lead and thyroid shield. Switch out your IR. So roll backwards about 45 degrees, rotation with the epicondyles. That is rotating externally. And she's going to switch out her IR. And rotate her hand palm down. That gives us the internal rotation of the elbow coming towards the middle. Internal. Internal oblique shows the coronoid process. External shows the radial head. Lateral 90-degree bend. True lateral with the wrist. Center to the middle of the elbow joint. And that's our 4 views for the elbow. So here's our AP radiograph. You should see the epicondyles are straight on, parallel to the IR. That gives us the olecranon fossa in the middle with the ulna and the olecranon process in the middle. Radial head and the capitulum should have a space there between them. You will see the radial tubercle is touching underneath the ulna bone. Then we have our external oblique. That gives us the radial tubercle free from superimposition. Radial head moves away from the ulna. External oblique, that's how you can tell it is an external oblique. This radiograph happens to be a pediatric. So you're going to see the growth plates, looks like fractures in the humerus and in the radius. Then our internal or our medial oblique is where you're going to see this little peak coming out, this coronoid process. Remember that sits in the middle. So it's kind of unique that we get it poking out on its side on the internal oblique. We have our lateral, another pediatric view. So we can see the true lateral shape of the end of the humerus, this trochlear notch area, and radial head touching the ulna. It's our 4 views for the elbow.
All right. So other than that, we'll have your link to the lesson posted and this Kahoot game that I've made for you. So you have some pictures, some questions to review for a little quiz on the elbow. So that's it for the forearm and elbow, guys. Make your matrix, review the videos, and we'll see if you have any other questions or need any extra help. Take this information and turn it into your own, make your own study guides and review.